Hello, I'm Brabazon from this very spooky early morning, and welcome to the Post 84 pre-interview screening, selection and shortlisting. Yes, we continue our series exploring that interface between education and the workplace and education. And we're in for a very interesting day today. So where we've been so far, we looked at the CV as a diagnostic. Last week, we focused on you constructing the best application that you humanly can. And that's tremendous. That's where we left it. This week, we continue the story into more tumultuous waters. We're applying the mantra today that you can control what you can control, and you've been able to control a fair amount in our first two posts. At this point, it's time to let go of the control. Let me explain what I mean. You may submit an application and you've given it everything. It's absolutely the best that you can do and you're proud of yourself. I'm proud of you. That's tremendous. But you submit that application and then you hear nothing. Absolutely nothing from the university, the institution or the organisation. Complete silence, and that's it. It's over. You never know what happened. It's just silent. So it's a liminal period, but you don't know it's a liminal period because the silence connotes ending. That's one version of this tale. But we're going to tell the other version of the tale today in this liminal space between you putting in an application and then you actually being shortlisted. Okay, we're looking at that space today. Now, some employers, an increasingly large number of employers, use the application that you've constructed as the first step of many in the employment process. And these demands that are going to come on you in this liminal period come from headhunters, educational consultants, but also the HR representatives and departments at the university. Now, in the old days, 10 years ago, application and appointment processes were very, very straightforward. Application, shortlist, interview, appointment. Great, easy, straightforward, clear, and relatively quick. The whole gig would be done in about 2-3 months, and that's even in university time, so that's pretty good. Now, the problem we've got right now is each one of those 4 stages has been rendered more complex, or as I'm describing it today, more baggy. A lot is going on. So what we're going to talk about today is, and I need you to remember once more, you have done everything that you can do by configuring a great CV and a great application. And I always tell my students, who have all ended up in fantastic jobs around the world, but I tell my students, give that application everything, but you have no control over what happens next. Let me say that again. Give me a great application, but you have no control over what happens next. Every step that comes post your application has very little to do with you and everything to do with the culture of the university, the business, the organisation, the institute. Now, this busyness in the university is sometimes referred to as fit. And this word is increasingly being used. It was sort of an old phrase that you'd hear in the 70s and 80s. Well, fit is back. And let me tell you why. So this is about your fit in the organisation. And obviously, that is not on you. That's on the organisation determining what fit actually is. And the notion of fit is being used in multiple ways at the moment. It is a word you have to monitor. And why I think it's back is universities have changed radically in the last 10 years, and all sorts of middle management jobs have been invented. So deans are everywhere. PVCs are everywhere. Then you've got the assistant deans, the associate deans, assistant PVC, associate PVC. So basically we've got a cluttered middle of the sandwich in a university environment. So therefore, because you've got this sort of very busy middle, it is very difficult to get a selection committee to agree on stuff. There are so many stakeholders in jobs that are advertised that finding a way to satisfy these people is almost impossible. And then we've got to add the pretty rubbish leadership that exists in many universities around the world. There are plenty of people that do not know what they are doing. So when they're doing an appointment process, it's not going to end well. So when I talk about someone not knowing what they're doing, what I mean is, and I've got granular criteria to assess this, is they cannot read an academic CV. They have no experience or expertise or qualifications in teaching and learning or in research activity, research development. So the core business of a university is teaching and research, and they have no expertise in teaching and research. So what is now happening, colleagues, is all sorts of proxies for excellence in teaching and learning and research are being put in place. A sensible leader should be able to look at an academic CV, look at the selection criteria for a job, and assess the fit. Should be able to do it very simply, and then, okay, we're constructing a shortlist. Here are the 3 to 5 best people that fit that selection criteria, having read the CV, because they've got CV literacy. They know what they are looking for, and they know what they're going to find, and they find it. Tremendous. The point is, and this is, again, might be helpful for you, this might be a point to remember hashtag going forward. If you are on the shortlist for a job, so you are shortlisted, you can do that job. Okay? So the people that are shortlisted can do it. So anybody can be hired and the job will get done. What happens with the shortlist is they pick the best person who can do the job. But if you've been shortlisted, that in itself is an incredible achievement. So think about what's happening in the organisation. We've received 90 or 50 or 30 applications, and we have to read them and make a cut. Pretty radical cut. Now, in the university appointments that I've talked about, you know this. The first cut is always the people that do not have a PhD. If we can choose between somebody who's already completed their PhD and somebody enrolled in a PhD, we will always choose the person that has completed the PhD, right? So that's the first cut. The second cut, again, is a pretty straightforward one. So if the person that's put in the application doesn't actually have the competency or the disciplinary expertise that is required. Remember, I've always said you apply widely, but you've got to apply for stuff that's in your wheelhouse. And what we increasingly are seeing, and I understand why, is people applying for any job, like an engineering job, and they don't have an engineering qualification. Okay, so yeah, nah. So that's our second cut. So we have someone that just can't do the job. Okay. Then there is, the next cut is the visa or nationalism issue. So if we are able to construct a strong shortlist of people that have a nationalism in that particular nation state, then we will do so. So it means we don't have to apply for a work permit and so forth and add work. So if we can shortlist on the nationals in that particular nation state, we will do so. And so the other people are gone at that point. That doesn't mean they're not great, but it means we've got a shortlist without having to apply for a work permit. Okay. Now, these are all very big, very straightforward ways to cut away the applicants and build up a shortlist. Now, in Australia, we have one more. So if you don't answer the selection criteria, you are gone, girlfriend, you are gone. Okay, so they need to be able to go, here are the selection criteria. Are there headings, selection criteria, paragraph. So we're looking for that. If someone doesn't do that, again, they're gone. Right, so we've got rid of a lot of people, fantastic people, great people, but not right for this post. And that's why we're focusing now on fit. These days, because of the economic environment, a university will not hire a human being unless they are desperate. So remember, we're dealing with a desperation labour culture. So somebody is needed to teach a course right now. Or, often what's occurring at the moment is an entire discipline has been gutted, right? So 5, 10 people are gone, and they're hiring 1 or 2 people, often at a junior level, to try and teach those degrees. Again, none of this is about you. None of it. This is about the needs of a university. And the university has problems to solve, and these are urgent problems. And they're going to, at this point, in terms of the definition of fit, shortlist people who can solve their immediate, urgent problem. This is not a great process, team. So don't think for one moment I'm going, oh, look, this is great. It's not. It is reactive. It invokes short-termism. And none of us make good decisions when we are desperate. Therefore, what we're looking for in terms of fit at this point is someone who can teach a lot, who can research a lot without support, and can be hired and immediately work well and work hard. Yeah. So that's part of what we call fit. And the panel at this point, after the big cut has been undertaken to the number of applicants, are looking for the candidate who can solve their problems. Okay, that's what we're looking for, and that's how the shortlist is constructed. So for me, you know, there's some problems here, but this is a more benevolent definition of fit. So we're looking at, okay, this is what we require in the job. This is the human being's skill set. Do they match? Okay, that's the nice definition of fit. The other definition of fit is really, really, really problematic. And this is when we start to use stuff like, I'm going to say it, stuff like emotional intelligence. All sorts of pseudoscience is deployed at this point. And actually this secondary connotative definition of fit is homological. That means the selection committee is looking for people just like themselves. So they're valuing particular universities, particular degrees from those universities, particular modes of publication, particular places where those articles and books have been published. And sometimes you even, it has happened to me, sometimes you even get a hashtag random asking you what school you went to. So the people who are different, who have a different career trajectory to the selection panel, are assumed to be lesser. So difference from the selection committee is seen to be a problem. Difference is lesser. This is a real problem. So whenever you hear the word fit, think about which of these two definitions are being deployed. In fact, both may be being deployed. Skill-based fit, you can do the job, great. But also the subjective ideological fit, the homological component. And by the way, that's why EDI, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, or DEI in North America existed. It's all got a bit confused at the moment, I understand that, but EDI was never about unqualified or underqualified people getting the job. In fact, it was the exact opposite. It was making sure that the actually qualified people would be considered for the job, to just interrupt homology a little bit. And as you know, I'm not a fan of an easy ride ever, particularly when you're doing an appointment. I want clear selection criteria. I want the criteria assessed rigorously. I want independent scoring of a candidate from a diverse panel, and I want scrutiny, and I want governance over the policies, the procedures, the behaviour that's being enacted when someone is appointed to a post. So I want full scrutiny. I want rigour here. I want a selection committee scrutinised. I want them governed so that they're not endlessly hiring mates and hiring friends. Or in the case of really poor leaders, and we have lots of them, they're activating the Peter principle. So they know they're a bit rubbish, and so they hire pretty rubbish people around them. The tragedy, I think, with the application process is that, particularly when there's already an incumbent in the post, so someone's acting in the role, And pretty well, unless something astonishing happens, they are going to get the job anyway. Or indeed there is a great friend of the committee that's going to get a job. And when you've got those sort of situations, really bad things happen through the selection process. So if there is an incumbent, from the application to the shortlisting stage, bad stuff happens. I'm going to talk about that bad stuff now, so when you see it or hear it, you can recognise it. You see, once the shortlist is assembled, so once we've got the 3, 4, 5 people at the shortlist, this is a reasonably public list. As we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks, the next couple of posts, often the shortlist is asked to do something in public. So do a seminar, do a teaching example, so people know that this human being has been shortlisted. So if that person performs well and the incumbent or the favoured son, daughter or non-binary identifying person underperforms, questions will be asked of the selection panel. Okay, so what happens in these types of selection processes where the committee does want to hire the incumbent, a friend or a mate, is that the best people, the absolute academic stars that most people would be on their knees going, thank you so much that this person applied, the absolute stars are removed from the process at the very start of the process. So you heard me correctly. If the post pretty well is already filled and they're simply going through the motions, then they exclude at the very earliest stage all candidates that may scupper their plans. Proxies that the appointment process is a farce include the following: a really, really short application process, so a week, 10 days or 2 weeks, yeah, nah. Limiting the appointment process to internal candidates. That's the new trick that when in doubt, if you can't control the process because so many great people are looking for work, you just make it available to internal candidates. Or, and this is the fun one, asking for very specific skills or characteristics that could only have been gained in that organisation using that particular software in that particular way for that particular job. So it's a data set of one. The person that's in the job is the only person that has that combination of interface management. So as you can see, there's a tight control over the people who can move to the next stage. Right. So you can see why I started this session today with a discussion of fit. So you've done a great application, you have to let the process go now. You have no control over what happens the moment you click enter on that application. And that's why I want you to keep doing applications, keep doing a lot of them. Give it your best, be fabulous, but then once you've submitted it, don't worry about it. Do a frozen, let it go. Right. We never know if a proper and ethical appointment process is in place. We just don't know. We never know if 100 people apply or 2. We just can't predict that. We can't know that. So you've got to apply for everything that is within your wheelhouse and do the best that you can. Okay, so now we're getting to the really messy, invasive and yucky stuff. And this yucky, humiliating stuff has increased in its frequency in the last 10 years because selection panels can no longer read an academic CV. They don't know what they're looking for the actual job because they're desperate, and therefore they have to use all sorts of really bizarre proxies, metrics, all sorts of weird conversations that exist between the application process and the shortlist. So there's plenty of information there, but they haven't got the literacy to read that information, so they have to construct new data sets. Okay, now this process, this weird bit here, is often called the long list. So the selection committee can't really cut down the number of applicants. And again, that's a proxy that you don't know what you're doing. Very straightforward. Read the application, know what you're doing. Getting it to 3 to 5 people is not too difficult. But for this group of people, it's difficult, so all sorts of things have to occur to help them cut it down again. So let me tell you what occurs. So an HR person, a headhunter, an employed educational consultant contacts you and invents tasks for you to complete. These can happen at any stage of the process, by the way, and increasingly are. So they really occur here, long list to short list. They can occur during the interview process itself, or indeed, unbelievably, after the interview process. But at this stage, you've applied, and all of a sudden you receive what you think is a wonderful email. You are on the long list. And the panel now wants you to complete some tasks. And these tasks are absolutely crucial. And that's not rubbish, by the way. These tasks are absolutely crucial, because at this stage, if you fail at or you fail to complete any of these tasks, you will be excluded from consideration. So all we're doing at this point is keeping you in the party so that you continue to be considered. You've got not much to gain, but everything to lose. I hope that helps you. So let's now present for you the 5 sort of clustered tasks that you're going to be asked to do at this point. 1, a series of meetings with a delegate. The first and most frequent thing that happens between the application long list to short list is you're asked to meet with someone in a one-on-one meeting. This is often called the pre-screening interview. This is with a headhunter. This is with an HR person from the university or organisation. It's very rarely with a full member of the panel. It may be the HR person, the rep, that's servicing and caring for that committee, that's fine. But you will not be talking to someone with a voting right on that committee. But what I need to say to you here is this is an actual interview and you need to prepare for it. We'll be presenting some stuff about how to prepare for an interview next week. But this is a screening interview. This is hard. If you don't do well here, you won't be shortlisted. But if you do well, you'll be able to continue with the process. Does not mean that you'll get the job. Because the person that's interviewing you is not a voting member of the selection panel, they're simply taking notes and they're presenting their view of you to the selection panel. See the bagginess. Okay. But this is a formal gig. This takes about an hour. Sometimes it's less, but it takes about an hour and it is an actual interview. But can I say, it's also much grittier than an actual interview because there's no scrutiny or governance on what occurs. So yes, you'll get the conventional handball questions asking why you applied, but you'll also get questions about money, about salary, and about dough. You'll get questions about family issues, relationships, children, and most importantly, you'll get questions about your weaknesses. Anything that they see as weird or abnormal in your CV, they will ask. So they're getting the information from you that the panel themselves cannot ask you. So yes, prepare the conventional questions that we'll talk about next week, but be prepared to be really uncomfortable. You're going to be asked really uncomfortable stuff. You rarely get behavioural or scenario questions in this pre-screening interview. What they're trying to do is find weaknesses and they'll then reify those weaknesses. This meeting is not so much a fact-finding mission, but a fault-finding mission. This meeting exists to find reasons to not shortlist you. All you can do is prepare everything you can, as you would for an interview, but also emotionally, physically, mentally prepare yourself to be asked really uncomfortable stuff. And can I say, the preparation you need to do is looking at your own CV, what could be considered a weakness, and start to narrativize how do you transform the weakness into a strength. Start to think that through. Don't hide from the weaknesses, acknowledge them, and then narrativize them forward. Okay, now this is a really important strategy in dreadful times. Consider everything that particular people may consider as a weakness and spin it for me. Okay. 2, here we go. IQ testing, testing emotional intelligence, personality testing, psych testing. This is a shocker. This is pretty new. I did my first stuff like this in 2016. So what happens is, before the shortlisting takes place, you have to complete an IQ test or its derivatives. It may be an emotional intelligence test. It might be some sort of psych testing. Now, these results have been denied and dismissed through the research literature for about 20 times. It's basically got the relevance of a horoscope, to be frank. But what is happening at the moment is that selection committees, the panels, can't make decisions on a CV. Remember, let's look at their data set. They've got 20, 30, 40 page CV. They've got a 2, 5, 10 page cover letter and addressing the selection criteria. They've got all that information. But they require more information as a proxy for something. Let's work on that something. Now, can I say to you, this is very serious. And you have to decide if you're going to participate in this stuff. If you say, no, I'm not going to do that, you won't be shortlisted. If you do it, you still may not be shortlisted. So let me give you, and this is my story to tell, and people rarely talk about this because it's so horrific. So I'll give you my story as a data point of one. So here's one case where I was asked to do an IQ test. It was 3 hours. It was online on a Sunday. 100 problems of increasing difficulty. And it was a Raven SPM Plus test for those of you interested in this rubbish. So in the interview, so I was asked we haven't been shortlisted or anything yet, right? I do a 3-hour test, and then the headhunter organised a 30-minute meeting with me to discuss the results of this test. So as I said, we're really in the preliminary stages here, and yet all this is required, all this stuff is required. Now, what was interesting about this case is this woman clearly was pretty unhappy in her job, and in fact told me at the start of this 30-minute meeting that she had resigned and she had 1 week left to work. And so, I wouldn't see her again, but she was having this meeting with me now. Okay. So what she told me was I received the highest score that she'd ever seen on this test. That's great. The highest score of all the applicants that had applied for this job by some means, and I was about 40% over the average that is given for this test. Now, I wasn't impressed by this. I'm still not impressed by this. This stuff doesn't mean anything. If you can do an IQ test, all that shows is that you can do an IQ test. It's not a generalizable data set in any way, shape or form. So I was very like, okay, well, what happens now? We're about 5 minutes into this 30-minute meeting. And so I, to fill in the time, I said, oh, look, I'm interested. Why was this test put in place? What was the goal here? What was necessary? I was asked to produce a very big portfolio of documents. So why is this required to construct a shortlist? And this headhunter, who was about to leave the organisation, told me she was actually very, very unhappy about this process and told me why it was in place. The truth she told me was as follows. The Vice-Chancellor was an engineer and questioned the intellectual ability of people in the social sciences and the humanities. So he discarded people's degrees, teaching qualifications, research expertise, discounted all of that because it was in the social sciences and the humanities. And of course, I was the only woman that was still in the party at this point, and he had assumed that a woman in the social sciences and the humanities wouldn't do well in an IQ test. Now, rarely in life do we hear truths like this. I've heard a few, when an HR person I worked with 20 years before retired, they send me a message on LinkedIn and said, told me some truths about what happened. That has happened to me, but you rarely hear in real time the truth of what's going on. And I think it's because the woman was about to resign and she was offended by the process. So she told me the truth. And she told me one final truth before she rung off. And that truth was, when she presented the results to the Vice-Chancellor in order, with of course my result at the top by a wide margin, he was shocked. So therefore, please know that if testing like this is occurring at this point before the shortlist, it's a way for people with a bias, with a lens, with a particular view, to gather a data point that is able to exclude some people from consideration. Now, this is exclusion and this is discrimination by proxy. So you have to decide, and these are hard decisions. Do you want the job? And if you want the job, you're going to have to put yourself through these pretty humiliating, terrible experiences. 3, more positively, write a vision statement. Another bizarre intervention between the long list and the short list is you're asked to write some kind of document. So you're given a writing task to complete, and that's added to the documents that you've already presented as part of the application. So what you learn when you're asked to do a writing task like this is the panel doesn't know what they're doing, and they haven't received the applications that they were expecting. So they're doing an additional writing task like this to gain either role clarity or applicant clarity. Now, don't get me wrong, vision statements are ridiculous. They were ridiculous in the 1960s. They're still ridiculous. And again, it's one of those tasks that you have everything to lose and very little to gain. But can I say, these vision statements are also incredibly useful for a university that doesn't quite know what it's doing at the moment. You see, basically they're using applicants as unpaid consultants. It's a great way to pick up ideas quickly and for free. But again, if you want the job, you have to do it. You have to do it well. You have to give your best ideas away for free. Can I say it's also a writing test? Can you write to order? Can you write to a deadline? And there are other versions of this task. Yes, the vision statement is the most common, but you can be asked, to write 2 pages on the future of your academic discipline, write 2 pages about your research plan in the next 2 years, write your teaching philosophy, most horrifically, 2 pages on your leadership style. My goodness me. So what's happening is they're gathering information from you like a consultant. They're testing your writing, testing your capacity to innovate, but also testing your capacity to do what you're told and follow directions. 4, it gets worse. Talk or write about the strategic plan. The only thing worse than being forced to read a strategic plan is to be asked to talk or write about it. Some institutions with truly rubbish leadership are incredibly invested in their strategic plan. In fact, often I can assess the degree of investment in a strategic plan is inverse to the quality of the leadership. So poor leaders endlessly talk about, they stand up, show the suit around and talk about the strategic plan. Okay, now the thing about a strategic plan is it's at high level, it uses very, very weird language, and it is completely pointless. So if you read basically, as I did in the last couple of weeks, 40 strategic plans from the Australian universities, there's about an 80% overlap between them. The same words are moved around like deck chairs on the Titanic. But from some leaders, there's this sort of evangelical commitment to their strategic plan. And so what happens in those sorts of organisations is a writing or speaking task emerges at this point. So the meeting with the headhunter or the HR consultant asks you to talk about your interpretation of the strategic plan and how you will deploy this in your role. So what you're learning is the VC, the DVC, the Dean is narcissistic, is self-absorbed, and they want you to tell them how good they are. So again, if you don't do this task, you won't be shortlisted. If you do this task, then you're going to have to drink the Kool-Aid. You're going to have to tell them how fantastic their strategic plan is and how you're going to use this strategic plan in your everyday teaching and research practice. This task is ensuring discipline, that you do as you are told, that you will follow instructions, and that you're deeply invested in the goals of this organisation. Therefore, when you do this task, you have to give them what they want. You have to be very excited about their strategic plan. 5. A 5-minute talk to camera about a topic. Now, this is an interesting one. This is a new one. They existed a bit before COVID, but obviously with COVID and the isolation and so forth, these sorts of jobs or tasks to camera increased, and this is one of the residues we have of COVID, this 5-minute talk to camera about something. Now, can I say, and you record yourself, so it's via Zoom or whatever, can I say that there's one variable, this is the benevolent definition of fit, where I think this is a great idea. So if the job is asking you to show excellence in online teaching and learning, then it makes absolute sense that you do a 10-minute mini lecture and show you can do it. I'm in favour of that. That's absolutely fine. It's a bespoke skill set. Can you do it? Yes or no. So that's fine. But it can take other forms. You can be asked to talk about your current research, talk about yourself, talk about your goals. It could be as simple, could you tell us why you've applied for this job? Okay, and do 5 or 10 minutes to camera and send that file. Now, this is a proxy for the selection committee. And of course, after this video, they know what you look like. They know what you sound like. They know your accent, and they can stop your application at this point. So you see, this is the great example of the fit issue we've talked about in this post. The first benevolent definition, but the second one, if they don't like how you look, they can remove you at this point. So obviously all sorts of discrimination and bias can emerge through this task. So be aware of it. Okay, so this post has existed to show you what can happen once you have submitted your application, when a shortlist is being conducted for an interview. Now, you may be completely ignored. So none of this will ever happen. Your application comes in, you never hear from them, that's it. And you'll never know if your application was removed because of your qualifications, something wrong with the selection criteria, you just never know. The second reason you're removed really early without doing these tasks is that you're better than the favoured candidate, and they simply have to get you out of the way so that nothing weird occurs, so that their mate is not hired. And then once those two variables are in place, these arbitrary tasks we've talked about today are introduced. And what it's doing is it's adding inelegant proxies and new data sets, where I would argue they're not actually required. The panel's got a CV, they've got a cover letter, they've got selection criteria. You should be able to make a decision at that point. Now, I've been quite hard in this post with you. You know, I adore you, and I've been very direct and clear in this post because I need you to know that sometimes, perhaps frequently, the best people who apply for a job are not even shortlisted. And that's why we have so much bagginess that exists at this stage, because it's all this stuff is providing excuses to stop an applicant from being promoted and moved through this system. You see, all sorts of strategies are put in place now to make you go away. Any excuse to stop you being shortlisted. So this is the culture of fit for a job, and yes, it's often homological. People are hiring people just like them, and they're excluding the best candidates before shortlisting even takes place. But also at this stage, and this is important for us all to acknowledge, we see panels not actually knowing what they're looking for. So they're developing new data sets because there isn't role clarity. So as you can see, this is not about you. None of this is about you. There's very little power that you have at this stage. You've got to hang in there, do your best, and know, and that's why I've gone through some of the horrific stuff, know that some of this stuff is going to be humiliating. It's going to be really dreadful. So do the performative tasks, take notes for yourself, and you need to remember what this university or employer has put you through to appoint you. You need to gather data at this point about your prospective employer, because you're going to be considering this information when you come to think about the job. And we'll be talking about that in a few weeks' time. So thank you all for being with me once more. We're having a great time. Let's do this. And I wish you all love, light and peace. Tea out.